students, welcome back to my channel at Maiora. I'm Sara and I would like to analyze with you one of the most representative and famous writers of the English literature and also its masterpiece. I'm talking about John Milton, probably the greatest of Puritan writers, and amongst these other amazing works, we are going to mention and analyze his masterpiece, which is Paradise Lost. So I'm going to divide this lesson into two videos, okay, so we can actually focus in this first video about Milton, about his life and about the periods in which we can actually divide his works. And in the following video, we are talking specifically about Paradise Lost because there is so much to say actually, and we're going also to read a part of the work and to analyze it together. This is extremely interesting and it's interesting also to go into details, and so we need some time to do that. That's why I've divided this lesson into two basically. Well, talking about John Milton, he was born and he died in London. Okay, he was born in 1608, and he died in 1674. As I said before, he was probably the greatest amongst the Puritan writers. He received from his parents the love for arts in general, for music. He studied at Cambridge, so he received a very classical education, and he learned also other languages, especially Hebrew, Latin, Italian, French, Greek. So obviously it was a very classical education. Then he decided to enter the Anglican Church. We can notice that since he was very young, his vocation has always been poetry. In 1638, he started a tour of the continent, and he actually traveled a lot, especially through France and Italy, where he met Galileo in Florence, in Firenze. He cited Cromwell. We know that this period here, so during the so-called Stuart era, is very interesting from an historical point of view, because in this period there is this strong opposition to the monarchy, and it is represented by the Puritan side that actually support the Parliament, so the limits to the powers of the monarchy. And for this reason, Charles I is actually executed after being forced actually to sign the Petition of Rights. And Cromwell, the head of the Puritans, he establishes a sort of a so-called republic. It wasn't a republic actually, because he was the Lord Protector and he has actually the whole power there. But anyway, the sort of a republic was called the Commonwealth. During this period, okay, Milton sided Cromwell and he worked for him. So when Cromwell actually died, that was in 1658, things changed obviously, because Cromwell's son wasn't strong enough to go on with the political project, the political plan of the father, and in a couple of years, the Commonwealth was brought to an end, and there was the restoration of the monarchy with Charles II, that was obviously Charles I's son. So that was a very difficult moment for Milton. Obviously, his life was in danger because he had always been an anti-monarchist, and he he had actually worked for Cromwell and against the monarchy. So he had to live in hiding for a certain period. He was also imprisoned. Actually, and luckily for him, he had quite powerful friends, and for this reason he wasn't killed, basically. He lived the rest of his life in London, in poverty actually, and obscurity with his 3 daughters. But that was definitely the most creative period of his life, okay? So we can actually divide his life as an artist into 3 periods, okay? The first period was between 1629 and 1639, so a decade basically, and it was about his earlier poems, okay? Some of them, l'Allegro, il Pensieroso, were extremely influenced by the Latin and Italian culture. Then there's a second period from 1639 to 1660, and in the second period we have also prose works and 14 sonnets. There are works concerning also education, then Iconoclast was a very famous work, and there was another one on the tenure of kings and magistrates, which actually talks about the King Charles I, okay? And finally, the third period of his life, that was, as I said before, the most creative period, which was from 1660 to 1674, the year of his death. And in this final period, he wrote Paradise Lost and then Paradise Regained. There was obviously a Christian view of the world in these works, but also many autobiographical elements. It actually talked in a symbolic way, in a metaphorical way, obviously, about the destruction of his political hopes, so we can say so, and the danger he actually had to face in order to support the execution of Charles I. But by the way, if you are interested in knowing more about the Stuart era and about, Cromwell, and then the Restoration, and then the Bloodless Revolution, and the Bill of Rights that follows, and so on. There is another video on this playlist here. It is called The Rise of the Novel, because actually it is the moment when this new genre, the novel, is created, and it is absolutely intertwined with the historical and social background. So in that video I talk specifically about all of these historical events, okay, in a very I hope effective summary. So if you want, you can go back to The Rise of the Novel, and the video won't talk just about literature, but it talks also about history and this specific moment. I will make another video if you like. You just tell me in the comments below if you would like me to do that, about that historical period, okay, a specific video side. Let's go back to Milton. Okay, talking about the Paradise Lost, obviously it's about the expulsion of Adam and Eve from paradise, but actually Satan is the other protagonist, probably the true protagonist of the work, which is quite revolutionary actually, because he's seen as a heroic rebel, okay, that fights against the absolute power of God, which is in this case, the royal despotism. So this is actually a political metaphor. The work is quite typical of the 17th century. We can actually find classical erudition and on the other side humanist ideals. There is obviously an emphasis of religious faith, strong faith, and we're obviously talking about Protestant religion because, as I said before, he joined the Anglican Church. As I said before, the work has got a lot of political metaphors, and so it represents obviously Milton's perspective, which was Republican and absolutely anti-monarchist, and that was exactly what moved the Puritans during the Civil War that was then represented by the execution of Charles I, Stuart. On one side we can say that the form of the work is, it's just classic literature. It's epic, okay, and full of tragedy. The style is the style of a tragedy. The content is obviously connected with Christian religion and with the Bible, obviously. Milton influenced literature, okay, after him, especially the poets of the 18th century. He was considered and he was called a great master of artificial style. What did they mean when they talked about artificial style? Well, he produced a very, very high language, a language that was based also on Latin, on Italian, on the Italian language, and it was formed of very long sentences and a lot of subordinate clauses. He used, obviously, as I said before, the structure was based on a Latin form, and he used the blank verse, which also meant condensing long periods while eliminating the words that weren't very important, okay, the weak words that didn't have a major meaning, okay, a very important weight in the sentence. He used a lot of adjectives and adverbs and relative clauses in a very specific way, which is quite typical of this style. So the work is obviously very important, not just from from a specific point of view concerning the content, the metaphors, the symbols, the topic itself, but also from another point of view that concerns language. So in my next video, we're going to talk specifically about Paradise Lost. We're going to read a part of it, so also in order to understand more about his language, about his metaphors, about the way he talked about Saturn, which was absolutely new for the time, and obviously with the text, okay, on the screen so you can follow, okay, with no difficulties. So stay tuned, and okay, we meet again, okay, in my following video talking about Milton again. Thank you so very much for following, and see you again very soon. Bye!